Welcome to our presentation video for Victor Translator, the English to Spanish machine translation program which has set a new benchmark for the industry. Victor was developed by MTC Soft, a Spanish software company with more than 25 years experience in made-to-measure software and database design. Victor was a commission from Translator, the translation company which is the promoter of this project. How did we create Victor? It wasn't easy. It was a 10-year project. Victor is a practical application based on the experience of a professional translator with more than 20 years experience working with machine translation programs. She even helped design some of them. How does it work? Victor has 4 principal modules or phases. The first 3 work on the English text, analyzing and labeling each one of the words which compose it. Only when we know what grammatical function is performed by each word in a sentence and the syntactic relations with the rest of the words do we move on to the final phase, the translation into Spanish. This avoids the errors which happen when a noun is confused with an adjective, for example. So complete and so precise is this labeling process that it has spawned a derivative product which we call Parcelizer, a useful tool for the development of the semantic web, recognized as such when we were invited to present it in the World Wide Web Conference in Madrid last year. Tim Berners-Lee sat in on the presentation. So, starting with the text in English, Victor submits it to more than 180 computer routines, which apply more than 500 linguistic rules. All the text is analyzed in each process, and words, symbols, internet addresses, etc. are all identified and labeled. The more complicated words like how and could are submitted to their own subroutines, and, of course, their grammatical functions are disambiguated. This is one of the most difficult and important processes in the analysis. Finally, we have a text which is properly analyzed and labeled, parcelized, if you will, and correctly translated into Spanish. Let's take a detailed look at a simple example. In phase 1, Victor identifies the symbols and words which make up the sentence, using its own dictionary, and assigns all the elements their possible grammatical functions. In phase 2, the most important, an exhaustive grammatical analysis is carried out and the grammatical functions are definitively disambiguated. This process with the English text is, without a doubt, the most complicated and the most important of the analysis. At the end of this phase, each word will have been assigned a unique grammatical function, just one of the colors in this representation. Phase 3 identifies the syntagmas, groups of words and the relations there may be between them. This is not as important as the grammatical analysis, but it's essential in order to achieve a true professional result in the final translation. Last, in phase 4, Spanish equivalences are assigned to each one of the English words. For this process to work properly, the program must have perceived the context and how the words condition one another when it comes to assigning the definitive term in Spanish. Let's take a quick look at how a more complicated example works. Starting with an English text, after the first phase, all the words and symbols are identified. The grammatical analysis of phase 2 has left each word in the text color coded. It was while looking at this image that we decided that this type of analysis would be useful for the semantic web, and Parcelizer was born. Phase 3 shows us the syntactic functions, and after phase 4 we have the text translated into Spanish. This is a real example, and this is how well it comes out. There are various key aspects in the Victor project which have been essential to achieve truly professional results. Perhaps the most important piece in the puzzle is the dictionary. 24 students and 7 professors of the Translation and Interpretation faculty of the University of Granada spent 4 months introducing one by one more than 150,000 entries into a dictionary which was made to order for the application. But the most important factor is not the number of words, but the detailed data on each one of them. For each word, there are more than 100 attributes for each one of its grammatical functions. This information is critical when it comes to taking decisions during the process of text analysis and of assigning Spanish equivalents. Each one of these fields, for example this one, city or country, fulfills a function in a given moment to help the program choose the exact equivalent in each sentence. Another of the keys to the program is knowing beforehand what we're going to encounter, particularly the errors of other machine translators in use today. We must keep them in mind from the first step. What was necessary was an entirely new analysis, not just an evolution of existing programs. There were two basic problems to be solved. With a simple sentence, "My tailor is rich," it's easy to achieve a good translation because there's a one-to-one relation between the English and Spanish words, and the defect equivalence, or the most common acceptance, happens to be precisely correct for this simple sentence. But what happens when we work with this other, more complicated sentence? There are English words which disappear, in this case, I and she. Words appear out of nowhere, this what. Some words have various possible meanings or equivalents. This is very common. There are groups of words in English, notably the phrasal verbs, which are converted to a single word in Spanish. We have resolved the choice of a correct equivalent in each sentence with a technique which we call conditioning. This is no more than being context sensitive. Perhaps the most elemental case is the noun-adjective pair. The noun task conditions the adjective easy, which becomes easy task, but the noun job conditions the translation of easy differently, so it then becomes comfortable. In this way, the same word is translated differently according to the context, according to the words to which it is united syntactically or semantically. Remember phase 3, syntactic analysis? This is an application of that. There are many other forms of conditioning and of ever-increasing complexity. For example, the verb reach can be conditioned by a direct object. In this example, we use the attribute city or country, which we saw before. One such simple detail can greatly improve the final result. Another example of conditioning, verbs, in this case enthuse, can condition prepositions. No Spanish speaker would guess that in English over is the equivalent of con or with without considering the context. Regarding the other problem, the fact that the number of words is different in the two languages, it has been resolved with 9 different dictionaries which apply case-based reasoning to questions of language. Additional prepositions are inserted in certain cases in the process of translation, in spite of the fact that they may not exist in the English sentence. The dictionary of fixed phrases includes groups of words which function as a single unit in the text. We now have more than 45,000 of them. Phrasal verbs have their own dictionary. I think we've captured them all, more than 2,000. There are idioms and colloquial expressions with incredibly complex grammatical structures. Once they're introduced into the dictionary, however, it's surprising how easily they can be translated. If you need additional information regarding Victor Translator, please contact Fernando Moreno-Torres. Thank you for your attention.